So we begin today by the first Mishnah on Chafala from the base. Sagt the Mishnah, Beishamai oimrim lo yochim adam chamen leraglov. Beishamai say you're not allowed to heat up water if you're just going to be using it to wash your feet. Right, so the point is that you only are allowed to do malacha for eichel nefesh if you're eating it. But over here you're heating up the water just to wash yourself, so that's not allowed. Elam kain ru'uyin l'shtiyah. Unless this water you're heating up is also fit for drinking. So because you're drinking, so therefore you could also heat it up and then you can wash yourself with this water. Taisus here clarifies, even though the Gemara's lashon is ru'uyim l'shtiyah, which is mashma that you're not actually heating it up for the purpose of drinking, but it could be used for drinking, but that can't be the pshat, because Beis Shammai does not hold of the concept of mitoich, that since I could use it for drinking, so therefore I could also use it for washing. It has to actually be heated up, that you're going to be drinking from it. And then the leftovers you can eat up extra, that you can wash your feet with it. Beis Hillel matirin. Beis Hillel says that it's allowed. That because the person is going to wash his feet from it, and the Torah allows you to do the malacha on Yontif, even for that purpose as well, you have a hanos haguf from it, it's allowed. Oisa adam medura, a person is allowed to make a fire, like a big fire in the fireplace, or mischamim kenegda, to warm himself up with this fire on Yontif. So the Mishnah doesn't say according to who this is. Is this Beis Hillel speaking? Is this Beis Shammai speaking? So the Gemara will explain right here, right now. So Zok the Gemara, Ibaya Lahu, the question was asked. Hai Medura, when it says in the Mishnah you could make a fire to heat yourself up on Yontif, Man Katanila, who's saying this? Divrei Akaili, is this everybody? This is both according to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And the reason why Beis Shammai would allow this, even though you're not actually using this fire for cooking and for eating, Vishani Luhu Beis Shammai, because according to Beis Shammai there's a difference ben anoas kol gufoi, if you're deriving benefit for your entire body, lahanoas ever echad, or you're deriving benefit for one limb. If you're heating up water just to wash your feet, so that's just your feet, so that's not allowed. But if you're lighting a fire in order to heat up your entire body, so even though you're not eating, but anoas kol gufoi, even Beis Shammai would allow. That's one pshat. Or we can say, no, oidilme Beis Hillel katanilo. This part of the Mishnah where it says you can make a fire to heat yourself up, that's only Beis Hillel speaking. Avo Beis Shammai, but according to Beis Shammai, loishani luhu, it makes no difference if it's one limb of your body, your entire body, it's not allowed on Yom Tov. Toshama, so the Gemara brings a clear braisa that tells us the pshat here. Beis Shammai oimrim, so the braisa says Beis Shammai said, lo yasa adam medura, you should not make a fire to heat yourself up, even if it's your whole body. V'yischamim kenegda, to warm yourself. Ubeis Hillel matirin, and Beis Hillel allows. So it's clear that this is only Beis Hillel speaking. Zok Teilige Mishneh shloisha dvarim. There were three things that Rabbi Gamliel machme kedivrei Beis Shammai, that Rabbi Gamliel was stringent and followed the opinion of Beis Shammai regarding on Yontif, even though usually we always pass on like Beis Hillel, but there were three things that he did like Beis Shammai. The first is ein toimnin esachamin lechatchila beyontif. You can't insulate foods to remain hot on a Yontif for the purpose of having it hot on Shabbos. Others are actually guided this in the Mishnah over here, that we're talking about a Yontif before Shabbos. Well, that's the case that we're speaking about. On Yontif, you're not allowed to do that tamana to prepare, to insulate the food, to keep it hot for the purpose to use it on Yontif. The Gemara is going to explain what the issue with this is according to Beis Shammai. We'll see. Another thing Beis Shammai was stringent about, ve'ein zoikvin es ha-menorah b'Yontif. If you have a menorah, Rashi says you have a metal menorah that fell down, you're not allowed to stand up the menorah again on Yontif. Again, the Gemara will explain what's the issue of standing up a menorah that fell down. A third thing, ve'ein oifen pitin geritzen, you're not allowed to cook, bake that is, bread, thick loaves of bread, ela rekiken. You're only allowed to bake thin slices of bread, or maybe like matzah or thinner bread. What did they call it over there?
Wafers.
Okay, wafers. And the reason is because, as Rashi says, tirche. It's an extra strenuous activity that you don't want to do on Yontif. Rabbi Gamliel said, Mimein shal beis Abba, all the years in the house of my father. They did not bake on Yontiv big thick loaves of bread, wafers or thinner crackers that he baked on Yontiv. So even though you're allowed to bake on Yontiv, but not with extra tirche. Amrulai, so they said to Rabbi Gamliel that said this, Ma nasa lebeis avicha, what should we do about the behavior in your father's house? Shahayu, machmirin al atzman, they were stringent with themselves, but umekilin l'chol Yisrael, but they were lenient for everyone else. Lias oifen, pitin, gritzin, v'chararin, and they did allow everyone else to bake even these thick loaves of bread, and chararin, which is breads that are baked directly on coals. And it's something which takes even more of a strenuous activity to get it right, to be able to bake it properly. So they allowed everyone to bake whatever and however they wanted, even though for themselves they were more stringent. Okay, so the Gemara starts with the first thing it said in the Mishnah, that Beis Shammai was machmer, that you can't insulate food on Yontif for the purpose of Shabbos. And Beis Hillel argued with that. So the Gemara wants to understand, what are we talking about over here? Hey, Chidami, what's the case of this Mishnah? Did he make a native tafshilin, which allows you to do any malacha from Yontif for the purpose of Shabbos? So then what's the issue? My time of the Beis Shammai. Why would Beis Shammai say you can't prepare the food from Yontif to Shabbos? That's what the Erev Tafshilin is. Everybody agrees that Erev Tafshilin works. If he did not make an Erev Tafshilin, so then my time of the Beis Hillel. Why would Beis Hillel say that this is allowed, that you can insulate the food to prepare from Yontif to Shabbos? So what is the case here? Amar Rav Huna answers, La'olam ei malach, I can tell you as follows, Shaloi hiniach eruv tafshilin. He did not make an erev tafshilin. So that's the reason why Beis Shammai says he can't prepare, insulate the food from Yontif to Shabbos. But why does Beis Hillel allow? Beis Hillel says, even if you did not make an erev tafshilin, the minimum that you need to eat in order to be able to live, that the Chachamim did allow you. And the Gemara brings the source of this. Rav Huna l'taimei. Rav Huna that said this pshat in Beis Hillel's opinion follows what he said in another place. The Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Mi shelo yiniach eruv tafshilin. Someone that forgot to make an erev tafshilin, oifun loy pas achas. You're allowed to bake in one loaf of bread. Or mevashlen loy, or according to the Bach's Gerse, v'toimnen loy kedeira achas. You can cook for him or insulate for him one pot of food. And madliken loy esaner, and you light for him one candle. And Mishum Rabbi Yitzchak Amru, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, he added and said, you could also roast for him a small fish. So, I mean, this lashon of the Gemara is not very clear what exactly the shiur of Kedei Chayav is. It says one bread, one pot, and one fish, but it's not exactly clear how large that pot is and how large this loaf of bread is. The point is that the minimum that a person needs to be able to live, you're allowed to prepare from Yontif for Shabbos, even without an Erev Tafshilin. Tanya Ramayachi, we learned like this in the Beitza as well. A person that forgot to make the Erev Tafshilin, so you bake for him one bread, you insulate for him one pot of food for Shabbos, and you light for him a candle, and you can prepare for him also one thing for hot water. And others say that you roast for him also a small fish. So this is the source. This Beitza, we see that this is what's allowed to be done, and that's what Beis Hillel was saying over here. Another pshat the Gemara says in the Mishnah, Rav's pshat is La'olam sheiniach. Really, the case here is that he did make an Erev Tafshilin, and nevertheless, Beis Shammai says you can't insulate food on Shabbos, on Yontif that is, for the purpose of Shabbos. Why not? Shani atmana. Beis Shammai holds insulating food is different than all the other preparations that you do on Yontif for Shabbos. Why? The mochacha milsa, because when you insulate the food, it's very clear that you're doing this only for the purpose of Shabbos. You're insulating the food, you're not going to eat it on Yontif. You're putting it away and you're wrapping it up to eat for Shabbos. So the point is, Beis Shammai held you could only prepare on Yontif for Shabbos when you do something that it's not directly noticeable that this is being done only for Shabbos. It's something that you could use for today. And then you leave it for Shabbos. But when it comes to Atmana, because that's something that you're preparing and it's clear that you're doing it only for Shabbos, for that, even the Erev Tafshilin doesn't help, according to Beis Shammai. So the Gemara asks on this, Abaye asked on Rav's Pshat, but we learned in the Beitza, and we had this before, Chananya said, Beis Shammai yoimrim, that Beis Shammai say, that the way you make an Erev Tafshilin is that ein oifen elem kein Erev bepas. You're not allowed to bake on Yontif for Shabbos unless you put aside in your Erev Tafshilin bread which was baked. And ve'eim bevashlin, you can't cook on Yontif for Shabbos, elem kein Erev betafshil, unless you included in your Erev Tafshilin a cooked item. Ve'ein taimnin, and you can't insulate food from Yontif to Shabbos, elam kein hoyle chamen tmunim out of Yontif, unless you prepared in your Erev Tavshilin also food that was insulated. So what do you see over here? Beishamai is saying, for every kind of malacha you want to do for Yontif, on Yontif for Shabbos, you have to make that in the Erev Tavshilin as well. But we see clearly, if in your Erev Tavshilin you insulated food and you prepared that part of the Erev Tavshilin, so miya of it. So then you could prepare, you could insulate food from Yom Tiv to Shabbos. Even though this is something that's clear, that it's being done only for Shabbos, but it's still allowed according to Beishamai. So Rav's Pshat is refuted from this Beitza. So Abaye says another Pshat on the Mishnah, the Pshat on the Mishnah here is that he put aside for the Erev Tavshilin a cooked item or a baked item, but not hatmana. He did not do hatmana, and therefore he can't be matman, he can't insulate food on Yom Tov Shabbos because he didn't include that in his Erev Tavshilin. Beis Hillel's opinion is that for Erev Tavshilin you just need one cooked item, and that allows you to do anything, whatever malacha you want to do from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Beishamai holds you have to have something for each kind of malacha that you want to do, for each kind of preparation you want to do. So therefore, in our Mishnah it was saying that he did not prepare hatmana in his Erev Tavshilin, so therefore he can't do hatmana to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. I mentioned already before that Taisus brings that our minig is that we take a matzah, which is a baked item, and we take some other kind of food, which is a cooked item, both of them to be able to do everything you need for Shabbos. The next thing it said in the Mishnah, ve'ein zoikfin is a menorah that fell on Yontiv, you're not allowed to stand it up. So the Gemara asks, what's the problem? My ka'avid, what is he doing that could be an issue on Yontiv to stand up on menorah? Rav Chinena bar Bisna, so he answered as follows: Hacha b'menorah shel chulyas askinan. We're talking about a menorah that's made up of segments. It's different parts that you put it together. The mechsi kebaina. So if he's going to take this menorah that basically fell apart, all the parts of the menorah fell apart, and he's going to put it back together so it looks like he's building. Even though he's not really building, but it's only mechzi kebaina, but nevertheless, the issue is that it looks like you're building something and putting it together. Now, so what's the machlokes here? Beishamai's opinion is yesh binyan bekelim. The malacha of building is even in a vessel, not only in a structure that's built on the ground properly, but even in a vessel there's binyan. Beis Hillel's opinion is ein binyan bekelim. The malacha of baina does not apply to a keli. In a keli, there's other kinds of malachas. There's a malacha of, Rashi brings over here, different kinds of malachas that apply to a keli. Machik, mechatech, oirik, teufer. There's other malachas that are for a garment, for a keli, but not baina. Baina is a malacha that's only for a proper structure that's built on the ground. And so therefore, ein binyan bekelim, vein stira bekelim. There's no demolishing. The malacha of binyan or stira does not apply to kelim. So therefore, according to Beis Hillel, there's no problem to put back together a menorah, a candelabra that's made up of segments. So Gemara brings now another story that happened in connection with the menorah, although it's a completely different kind of halacha. Ula ikla lebei Rav Yehuda. Ula on Yontiv was by Rav Yehuda. Kam shameh. So the shamish, the servant of Ula, got up and zokaf lo l'shrage. He tilted the lamp, the wick of the lamp, and what he was trying to do is he wanted that the fire should go out, that it shouldn't draw from the oil, and the fire should go out. So he was doing this to cause the fire to go out. So that's what the shamish of Ula did. Eisvei Rav Yehuda le'Ula. So Rav Yehuda asks Ula, how do you allow your servant to do this? We learned in the Beitza, Hanois and Shemen beneid, if you add oil into a candle, chayiv mishum maver. You're chayiv, we're talking about on Shabbos here. So you're chayiv for making a fire. You're adding oil to make the fire burn longer. V'amistapik mimenu, and someone that takes oil out of a lamp, chayiv mishum machabe. You're chayiv for extinguishing the candle. You took out the oil, it's going to burn less. Taisus actually explains that the reason you chayiv for mechabe is not because it's going to burn less, because that's only a gaidim. It's just a cause. But the reason why you chayiv mishum mechabe, Taisus says, is because as you're doing it, when you're taking out the oil, at that very moment, the actual fire, the flame, dims when you take out the oil. So therefore you chayiv mishum mechabe. So the question is, how is his servant allowed to tilt the wick in such a way that that the fire should go out? Amalei. So Ula answered, Lava datoi, wasn't with my consent. He didn't ask me about this. It's not that he didn't hear from me that you're allowed to do this. Amar Rav says, or others are good, is Amar Rav Yehuda, Kanba shori. Kanba is allowed. What does kanba mean? When you have a wick and it burns, so a lot of times at the tip of the wick, it creates this black piece that doesn't allow the fire to burn nicely. So you want to remove that black piece of the wick that's there, trim it in order that it should burn nicely. That's allowed on Yom Tov, to have the fire properly. At what? At what?
Handle from that pot gets loose, you're allowed to...
If you're allowed to...
That's a kalim.
According to Beitza, going back to before, when it said Ein binyan bekalim, it's allowed, but I'm not sure when again with the Rabbana. That I'm not sure.
Toys.
Huh?
Toys that kids put together.
Yeah, there's also it's not there's no binyan over there l'chayda. But depends if it's something that's large enough, so then it's not allowed. Abba bar Marta asked a question from Abaye. Ma'u l'chabes esaner mipnei dova acher. Are you allowed to extinguish a candle for another purpose? What this refers to is, you're not allowed to have any marital relations if there's light in the room. So you want to put off a candle in order to be allowed. So are you allowed to put off this candle on Yontif? So Abai answered him, so you can go to a different room or a different house. Why do you have to put off the candle? So the Gemara says, but what's if ainly by Sacher? If he does not have another house or another room, so the question still is he allowed to put off the candle? So he says to him, Efshele lasas le mechitza, so make a partition. How about ein le lasas mechitza mai? But if he does not have a partition, are you allowed to put off this candle? So again, Abaye says, Efshele chbisol of keli. You can put a keli over this candle to take away the light. How about ein le keli? If he does not have a keli mai, what's the halacha then? Omalei. So finally, Abaye says, Osir, it's not allowed. So it's interesting how Abaye answers this. He didn't give the answer directly right away. Kept on pushing him off until he finally said it's Osir. So according to some Paiskim, the Taz says that really Abaye held that it was mutter, but he didn't want to say so befedish because we'll see there's later a Gemara that says that this is something which is mutter, but you're not supposed to say befedish that it's mutter. So therefore he kept on pushing him off until finally he pushed him to the wall. So he said it's Osir. But we don't pass in this way. The Alter Rebbe brings this in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe passes like it says here in the Gemara that it's Osir. Frag the Gemara, why is it Osir to put off a candle for this purpose? Eisvei, learned in Abraise, ein mechabin esabekas, you're not allowed to extinguish the fire of a piece of wood, kidei lochas aleo, if because you want to save the wood for something else. So for that purpose, you're not allowed to extinguish a fire on Yom Tov. But if you're putting off the fire of this wood because it's smoking up the house, or it's burning the food in the pot, then mutter, then it is allowed. So what do you see over here? That just for the purpose of the house, that it's smoking up the house, even though there's no actual hana of eating that you're having from this malacha that you're doing, it's allowed. So why don't we say the same thing regarding putting off a candle for the purpose of the hana of the marital relations? Why shouldn't it be allowed to put off? Amalei, so he answered him, Hahi Reb Yehudahi. That brisa that says that you could put off a fire because of the house that's getting smoked up, that's Reb Yehuda's opinion. And Rashi here brings, we're going to learn this later on Daf Chav Ches, Reb Yehuda says that when the Torah was mater, Oichel Nefesh, it's not only eating. He learns out from the Pasuk when it says, Ye'oseh lochem l'chol tzarcheichem, that on Yontif, anything that you need, any kind of benefit or any tzedek you have, including this case over here, where your house, the walls of your house are smoking up, you're also allowed to do that on Yontif. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But ki ko amina ano, when I told you that it's not allowed, l'rabbanon. I was saying this according to the Rabbanon say that the Torah is allowing only oichel nefesh. And Rashi here brings the pasuk hu levadei, just oichel nefesh is allowed, but not any other kind of benefit. Abaye asked a question from Rabbi. Are you allowed to put off a fire, put out a fire on Yontif? So he explains this question. If there's danger of life, so obviously I'm not asking a question. Even on Shabbos you're allowed to put off a fire if there's a life in danger. When is my question? Mishum ibud mamin, a loss of money, a loss of your possessions. Are you allowed to put out a fire? What's the halacha on Yontif? Amalei osir. So he answered him that the Rabbi answered him it's osir. So he asked him the same question from the Bryce that we just quoted. You're not allowed to put off a fire from a piece of wood. If you're trying to save this piece of wood itself. But if you're putting it off not to smoke up the house or the pot, mutter, it is allowed. So here you see that it's allowed not to smoke up the house. Answers the Gemara again, Hahi Rabbi Yehuda. That Beitza follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Ki kamina ana l'Rabbanan. Rabbi is saying, I said according to the Rabbanan that even if it's going to burn down your house and you'll have a loss of money, but there's no life in danger, you're not allowed to put off the fire on Yontif. Ravashi asked a question from Ameimar. Are you allowed to apply this ointment on your eyes on Yontif because you have pain in your eyes? So the Gemara explains when his question is. If there's a danger, your eyes are in danger, and the Gemara explains different things, rira, when you have coming out of your eyes, rira, how do they translate rira over there? Okay, I don't know what that was. Okay, this this liquid comes out of your eyes, or ditza, Yeah, okay, or ditza, which means that the person feels pain in his eyes, like a person that sticks a needle into your eyes. You feel a tremendous prick in your eyes. Dome, or there's blood coming out of your eyes. Dimasa, constantly tearing. Kadechta, your eyes are hot. It's like a fever. Or tchilas uchle, or the beginning of a sickness where a person feels that the illness that's coming in his eyes. So all of these cases could be dangerous. So let me boil. Then I don't have any question that you're allowed to apply this ointment to your eyes. Even on Shabbos it's allowed. When was my question? When it's at the end of an illness, when a person is already getting better, but he wants to apply this ointment to help his vision, just to make it better for his eyes to be able to see. Is this allowed on Yontif? There's a certain hana you have of this. Are you allowed to do this for this kind of a hana or not? Amalei, so he answered him. Ameimah said it's not allowed. So again, the Gemara clarifies, Eisvei, so the question was asked, it says in the Beitza, you're not allowed to put off the fire if you want to save this piece of wood. But then the Beitza says, but if you want to put it out in order that the walls shouldn't smoke up, you are allowed. So you see that you are allowed for such a kind of benefit. And he gave the same answer as we said before. That Beitza says Rabbi Yehuda, and we follow the Rabbanan that say that it has to be a malacha of Eichel Nefesh. Now the Gemara says, Ameimer, the same Ameimer, Shari lemichel eina minachri b'Shabbata. He did, however, allow to paint your eyes or whatever, to apply this ointment to your eyes, even on Shabbos, if it's a guy that's doing it for you. Ikedamri, there are others that said this a bit differently. Ameimer gufe kachal eina minachri b'Shabbata. Ameimer himself had a guy apply this ointment to his eyes on Shabbos. So now Ravashi says to Ameimer, my daitech, what's your opinion? Why do you allow a guy to do this for you? Is it based on this statement that Ula, the son of Ravilai, said that that all of the needs of a person that's not well could be done through a guy in Shabbos, and that refers even to a person that's not well, even if there's no life danger to his life, nevertheless you can do it through a guy. So therefore you're allowed to apply this ointment to your eye through a guy, because that's the rule. You could always do it through a guy. Rav Nun explained, anytime you have an illness but there's no danger, you tell a guy and the guy does it for you. So that's why Rav Ashi asks the question, but that doesn't apply over here. That's only if you're not assisting the guy to do this work, to do this malacha for you. But you, when you're allowing this guy to place this ointment in your eyes, you're assisting him. How? You close your eyes, you open your eyes. The guy can't put the ointment in the right place if you're not going to make your eyes available properly for him to be able to put it. Right? That's what it seems like. So Amalei, so Ameimer answered, no. Ikke Rav Zvid, the koi kivasach. There's Rav Zvid that holds like you. And Vishan Yelei, and I answered him that Messiah aim by mamish, that we have a rule that when you're only assisting someone else that's doing the malacha, there's no mamish to that. There's nothing to that. Right? And the Rashi explains what that means is that if someone else can do what he's doing all alone and he doesn't need your help, and you help him anyways, so aim by mamish. So then your help is worthless, doesn't add anything. So over here as well, even though I am opening and closing my eyes, and I'm helping the guy put the ointment, but he could have put it on his own. So therefore my help is worthless, I'm not contributing to the work that he's doing. It's like the Gemara, Meimer shara lemichal eina b'yomtiv sheni shalosh hashana. A meimer allowed to place this ointment in your eyes on the second day of Yom Tov, and not only of a regular Yom Tov, but even the second day of Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah. He also allowed that the Yid himself could go and put this ointment in his eyes. So Rav Ashi asked the question to Meimer as follows. We learned already before here in the Gemara, Rav said as follows. Meis b'Yom Tov Rishon, if a person passes away, if it's the first day of Yom Tov, Yisaska b'Yamamin. So then you have to have Goyim that will bury him. B'Yom Tov Sheni, if a Yid passes away on the second day of Yom Tov, Yisaska b'Yisrael. Second day of Yom Tov, which is only Midrabanan, and the whole Yom Tov Sheni is a Sveika d'Yayme, and really it's a day which is a Chayil, it's a weekday. So therefore, a Yid could go and bury him. And then Rava adds Va'afilet b'shnei Yomim Tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. That includes even the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. If you remember what we learned the Gemara before regarding Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is not a Sveika d'Yayme. All the other Yomim Tovim, it's either the first day is the Yom Tov and the second day is Chayil, or are they opposite? Because there's a suffix which is the right day of Yom Tov. That's how the whole takana originated, to have 2 days. By Rosh Hashanah, the takana of the 2 days is not because of a suffix. Chachamim were masakin to have 2 days because of the story in the Beis HaMikdash when the Eden came late. We learned it before. So it's really like one long day. Both days have the same kedusha, right? So, but nevertheless, the difference of Rosh Hashanah and all other Yomim Tovim is not beneged to burying a mace. Over there, they did compare Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, to all other Yomim Tovim, and on the second day, you're allowed to bury a person. But Rava added, Masha'en came bebeya. But that's not when it comes to an egg. An egg that's born on one day Yom Tov, so we learned this before, an egg that's born on one day Yom Tov, on the first day Yom Tov, you're allowed to eat it on the second day Yom Tov. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, an egg that's born on the first day Yom Tov, you cannot eat on the second day Yom Tov because the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are considered to be like one long day. So if so, his question to Meimah was, how do you allow to apply this ointment on your eyes on the second day of Rosh Hashanah if it's considered to be one long day with the first day of Rosh Hashanah? Amalei, so Abaya answered him, or Meimah that is, Meimah answered him, Ano ke nerdoi svirili, I follow the opinion of nerdoi. The Omri, they said, Af bebeya. Even regarding an egg that's born on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to eat it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And therefore I also allowed to apply this ointment on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And the nerdoi, they explained, Demai daitech. What's your opinion? Why are you saying that the second day of Rosh Hashanah should be more stringent than any other Yom Tov? Dilme ma'abri leila elul. Because maybe the story with the Edom will happen, that they come late in the day, and then Elul will have an extra day, and the next day will really be Rosh Hashanah. That's what the issue is. But that's not going to happen, because Ha'omer Rav Chinana bar Kahana said, Mimois Ezra ve'elech. From the time of Ezra, in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash, Le'matzinu Elul mu'obar. It never happened that Elul was 30 days, that there was 30 days of Elul and that Rosh Hashanah was delayed a day. It never happened. So therefore, we don't have to be chayshish for this, and therefore the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah, the second day is just a takana midrabanan, and therefore we can be mekel on the second day to place the ointment in the eyes. The next thing it said in the Mishnah, ve'ein oifen pitten gritzen eller kikin, that Beis Shammai's opinion was that on Yom Tov, you shouldn't bake bread that are thick loaves of bread, but the thin crackers, thin wafers of bread. Tana Rabbanan, in a Beitza we learned, Beis Shammai said, Ein oifen pas over bePesach. You shouldn't bake thick bread on Pesach. Beis Hillel matirin, and Beis Hillel allows. So you learn the simple pshat of this Beitza. It seems like that this is out of a concern of it becoming chametz. If you make the matzah too thick, it could rise and it become chametz. So the Gemara explains, the kama passover, how thick is considered to be a thick bread that they're arguing about this. Amaravune tefach. So a tefach, up to a tefach is allowed, but if it's more than the thickness of a tefach, that's too thick, and then you can't make it that thick according to Beis Shammai. And the Gemara explains why the shiur of a tefach. Shekeimatzinu belechem aponim, because we find regarding the lechem aponim, tefach, that the lechem aponim was baked in the height of a tefach. In order to have the lechem aponim in the shape that it was, like facing each other, the two parts, so it has to be the height of a tefach, and the lechem aponim had to be baked matzah, not chometz. So therefore that's the amount, that it could be a tefach. But more than a tefach, according to Beis Shammai, it's a problem. So we're learning it from lechem aponim. So on this the Gemara asks, Maskef Lord of Yosef, how could you learn from lechem aponim? Im amru bezrizin, if over there they're saying that you have the kayanim, which are zrizim, which are very careful. So they're careful that even if it's a tefach, that it should not become chometz. So yomru b'sheinam zrizin. Should the same apply to everybody else that is not as careful as the kainim, that even if it's a thickness, a tefach, that it won't become chametz? And the Gemara brings there a few different points. Im amru bepas hamela. If they said regarding this bread that was used for lechem upon him, which is pas hamela, which was kneaded very well, yemru bepas she'ein hamela. Should the same apply to bread that wasn't kneaded as well? Im amru beitzim yeveshim. In the Beis HaMikdash, they used very good dry wood. Yemru beitzim lachem. Should the same be regarding an oven that's heated with moist wood, and therefore the fire is not as strong? Im amru betana cham. Over there, they allowed you to have this bread that's a tefach big. And it's a oven which is much hotter because it's used all day. They cook and they bake in it, all the menachas. Yemru b'tanet tzainon. Should they say the same thing regarding a colder oven? It's that a person bakes his matzah in it. Imamru b'tanet shal matches. In the Beis HaMikdash they used a metal oven. Yemru b'tanet shal cheres. So the heat of an earthenware oven that's not as strong as the metal oven in the Beis HaMikdash. Could you rely and compare to there to say that you can bake a matzah which is even a tefach thick? So how can you compare to the lechem upon him? So Rav Yirmiyah explained that really there's a whole other pshat here. She'elis as Rebbe b'yichud. I asked Rebbe about the pshat of this machlokes here, and it was privately. Umane Rav, and who's the Rebbe? Rav, and I asked him, my pasova. What does this mean, thick bread? So he said, pas merube. It does not mean thick bread. It means that you don't cook a lot of bread together on Yontif, because it's too much of a tirche to cook extra or to bake extra to a lot. That's what Beis Shammai was saying is not allowed. Ikeda Amri, others say Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav. He said in the name of Rav, She'elis es Rebbe b'yichod. I asked Rebbe privately, Umanu, and who is this? That Rav said he asked Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He asked Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, my pasova. What does pasova mean? Pas merube, when you're baking a lot of bread together. V'amai korilem pasova. Why do you refer to baking a lot of bread together? Why is it called pasova? So the answer is because that's just the way people called it. Pasova korule, mishum de nefisha belisha. Because when you're kneading it, so there's a lot of thick dough to knead, so therefore it's called pasova. But really it means that you don't bake a lot of bread on Yontif. If you're going to bake on Yontif, you just have to bake a little bit that you need for Yontif. That's what Beis Shammai holds. And the Gemara explains, Inami, or another pshat why it's called pasova, ba'asrei, the haitane, pas merube, pasova korele. It's just the name, the way people refer to it. In this place, they called it pasova. So the Gemara says, Mechti, let's see, what's the issue over here? Mishum de kotorach tirche de loitzarech. The issue that Beis Shammai has is that you're doing a strenuous activity, you're working and you're preparing extra bread that you don't need for Yontif. So if so, the question is, my area Pesach. Why did it say in the Beitza that they're arguing about Pesach? They should argue about every Yontif. So the Gemara answers, you're right, enechanami. Their argument about this bread, that you bake a lot of bread, is on every Yontif. And the Tana, the Yontif, the Pesach koi, that Tana was speaking about Pesach, so therefore he mentioned Pesach. But really the machlokes is not about Pesach. Tanya nami hachi, we learned so in a Beitza. Beis Shammai yomrim ein oifen pas merube b'Yontif. Beis Shammai say you can't bake a lot of bread on Yontif, or Beis Hillel matirin. And Beis Hillel allows, and Rashi says the reason why Beis Hillel allows is, we had before in the Gemara, that if you want to have bread that's baked well, the more you fill your oven with more bread, the hotter it is, and the better the bread will bake. That's why it's allowed, according to Rashi. According to Tosfos, he says there's a different reason, because if you're going to tell a person that on Yontif you could only bake yourself a little loaf of bread, you're not going to want to do it. You're going to make the whole tirche to go and bake and knead and heat your oven and do everything just for a little bit of bread. You're not going to want to do it. If you tell a person that you can bake as much as you want, then he'll go ahead and bake. And therefore, Beis Hillel allowed to bake on Yontif as much as you want.